Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is AJ Kuftik, Field CTO here at Expedient. And joining me today, over here to my this way, I got it right the first time, is Doug Thies. Doug, go ahead and introduce yourself. Just want to make
Hi,
sure.
I'm Doug Thies, Director of National Strategy with Expedient. AJ, glad to be here with you and all of our attendees.
Absolutely. Doug, we've done these before. It's been a minute since Doug and I have got to do some fun talking on the internet. I'm excited. I love talking to Doug. But first, I want to let everybody know that we went on a little trip. We went out to Las Vegas. We went to VMware Explore and got to explore everything that VMware had to offer. And we had a booth. And Doug, kind of, what were we there to do? Kind of what was the vibe going on at Explore this year?
Well, we attended this year specifically because of the Broadcom change, and we saw some changes from previous years. Attendance was lower, as most would imagine. The numbers we heard were 5,200 all in, which was about half of what the previous year was, and nowhere near the pre-COVID numbers of up to 20,000. I saw a lot of people comment about the number of booths in the show portion being way fewer than it had been in past years. And people noticed when the food lines formed that there were a lot less people. In terms of who was there, we saw a lot of Fed, local and state and utilities folks, probably more as a percentage of the entire crowd than usual, probably fewer commercial and fewer enterprise attending. And there was a clear thread that ran through most people's comments, especially the first or second comment. And I'm sure you heard it too, AJ. Many were unhappy with the new licensing model and with the new pricing.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely something that we saw a lot of in the booth, and we heard a lot from people was, because things are changing over and over again. I will say that there were definitely a much lower number of booths, but at least one of the booths was better because we were there. And I think it was interesting to kind of see what people were gaining from each booth. They were coming around, they were talking to each other. The booths were talking to each other too, which was very interesting because we're all kind of comparing notes at the same time. And Doug, I think one of the big things though that they did at the conference was they specifically talked to about the future of what they were doing and what they've been building, right? We've been talking for months now about vSphere Foundation and Cloud Foundation and bundles and all sorts of things. And I think the biggest piece of this is that they finally told people where they're going, right? They didn't talk about it in terms of just like a set of series of individual components. They talked about it in terms of an overall platform, right? So Cloud Foundation is vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and the ARIA suite. And to VMware now, it is just VCF. It is just Cloud Foundation. ARIA operations is kind of now inside of there as Cloud Foundation operations. And automation is in there as Cloud Foundation automation. And they're trying to bring all of this together into a single platform that they're calling VCF 9. And they mentioned in their keynote, they mentioned a little bit of edge and they mentioned a little bit of AI. But the big story was, here is our new platform. Here is what we're doing. I will say, though, the presenters seemed just a smidge uncomfortable. Like they knew there was a very large elephant in the middle of that audience that they kind of sort of had to address. We know you're mad, but here's what we're doing. This is why we made these changes. This is why because we see this as the actual platform of the future and not just a bunch of components that you need to then go deploy and manage and maintain.
I think you've captured the keynote pretty well. We heard from in the booth that some people said that they felt like it was backwards, the keynote. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think it was. Well, not even just the keynote was backwards, but the way they've gone about the changes was backwards. That, hey, you raised my rates, you created these new bundles, you created this new pricing, but it just looked to me like you were raising my prices. Now, when we're actually watching the keynote, we're seeing what that value turn, what the price change and the uplift in amount of things that you're getting out of the solution, where it's really going, and it actually makes a lot more sense now. But you have so many people who are currently mad about money and not thinking about where that value actually goes. If you're a vSphere customer, which 75% of customers of VMware were just vSphere customers, yeah, it's a huge cost shift. If you were using multiples of those tools, like you were a vSphere and vSAN, or you were VMware or vSphere and NSX, or vSphere in the ARIA suite, you likely saw a less overall increase, if not a savings here. And it was interesting to see the customers who were already in the multiple product set. When they came back, they were like, VCF9 is amazing. This is definitely what I want to see. This is definitely where we see VMware going. Others who were vSphere only are like, yeah, I see where they're going. And yeah, that looks really cool, but that's still a big number now. And so it is on, I think, VMware overall to kind of help people expand more into that product set. And that's kind of where we as a cloud provider came in. But Doug, we did actually do one very cool thing in our booth. Doug, what did we do?
We were one of a small handful of providers, Pinnacle providers, who were at VMware Explore, and we really wanted to bring value to the crowd and to find out what they were thinking at the same time. So we crafted a survey, and I'll give credit to our team, Nick Leaf and Nick Lansbury, for putting this together. We asked a simple question: where will your VMware workloads live in the future? We had a small monitor up front, and there were three answers that they could respond with. One was public cloud, one was VMware, they'd continue on, and the third was an alternate hypervisor. So the results were interesting. We had 208 respondents over the course of the show, and these are the results. 41% said they were going to stick with VMware, either in a DIY model or in a VMware style cloud. 45% said that they were deeply considering an alternate hypervisor. And surprisingly, to me at least, the hyperscale cloud choice was the smallest by far at only 14%.
And I think one of the most interesting things to me, at least, as I was also walking around saying, "Hey, what do you think? Answer. Would you like to take a poll?" The answers didn't come quickly. No one was immediately tapping a alternate hypervisor or a VMware cloud. It was always a, what about this? Yeah, that one. And I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in the field, but a lot more people right now are saying that they want to leave. And by the way, these are paid attendees of this conference. This is not on the street. This is not our LinkedIn page. This is not on our website. These are people who paid to go to VMware's conference.
That's right.
It was very interesting to see these numbers pan out. And one of the other things that we did, and Doug, I think this was the most interesting part to me, was like, alternate hypervisor. There's a lot. There's not just one, right?
Right.
So we kind of asked a baby poll inside of that, of what does that alternate hypervisor break down to? And it breaks down to 41% saying Nutanix AHV, 24% KVM, the pure open source hypervisor, 18% on Red Hat OpenShift, which is owned by IBM, and 18% to Hyper-V. And I think these numbers are fascinating.
I agree wholeheartedly. Why do you think AHV is so high?
I think AHV is really high because it's been the one platform that has very distinctly tried to go feature for feature with VMware. Software-defined networking. They were the ones who created the software-defined storage craze. vSAN came out after Nutanix rolled out, and people were really paying attention there. Um, but I think it's the one that is the most sort of analogous in the space to VMware and what VMware has done overall. And honestly, what VCF 9 is what the Nutanix platform has been for the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years now, in terms of what Nutanix has been building into their stack, even to the point of Nutanix switched to a subscription model too. So it's kind of interesting to see them kind of even out there. I also think AHV has the most integrated ecosystem outside of VMware. This is something that a lot of people forget. Where you run the VM is the easy part, right? I can pick a different hypervisor and just move things over. That's not the hard part. It's everything around it and how you manage those things that becomes the challenge. So I'm not surprised to see AHV that high. I was surprised to see KVM that high.
Me too. Me too. I was surprised. We were the only provider there advertising Nutanix Cloud as a cloud provider, and a lot of people were surprised that we were saying it out loud at VMware Explore.
Yeah.
But it generated a number of conversations. Just to loop back on Nutanix for a moment, I
Yeah.
think the maturity of the platform is meaningful to a lot. We've been using it on the back end for many years, and started with DR first for Nutanix clients, and now we're offering a production model on this. But I think maturity plays a big part. KVM is surprising. AHV is a fork, an age-old fork of KVM, right? It's based on KVM. Many of the other hardware solutions are KVM based.
Yep.
But your point in that, what about the other tools associated with it? How does your backup work? How does your DR work? And how do all your utility tools that you use to provide data protection and security and all the other things that you do, monitoring, how do they work with these other hypervisors? It's a huge question.
Yeah. And Doug, I think the other one that kind of stuck out, and you kind of mentioned it, was hyperscale cloud being at 14%. Why do you think it was so low, in your opinion?
I think people have tried it and they found that many of their old code applications don't run well in it. Honestly, I mean, 2007 is when AWS hit the market. Some argue 2008. Many people have tried to move their entire set of workloads into those environments. Some workloads work perfectly. Other workloads are expensive and slow. They're expensive because the apps are chatty, because they were never written with a cloud in mind. That's especially true for line of business applications like EMRs and ERP applications. And many of those applications still run in the data center, whether it be on premises or in co-location. So I think that's the big reason. Most people realize that the reason they still have a data center is because some of their applications won't fit. And I think it's why they've kept VMware, and why the public cloud number, or the hyperscale cloud number here, is so low. What about OpenShift, AJ? Do you think it's the Linux crowd who's considering it?
I would imagine that plays into it, and I think Hyper-V is in sort of the same boat, just from the Microsoft side. These are the platforms of the vendors of the operating systems that people have built apps on top of, right? If you're a Red Hat customer, you've used OpenShift before. Red Hat has been pushing the crap out of OpenShift for the last 5+ years. It was started as a Kubernetes platform, and then they added in VMs, because they had a VM platform, they had a Kubernetes platform. They just kind of smushed them together. I think on the Hyper-V side, it's interesting because Microsoft also has Azure Stack,
Right.
and Azure Stack and Hyper-V can run VMs on-prem. Microsoft has not made a delineation to where they think they want to put their efforts. I'm also very surprised by that fact, because of the big push and what Azure does branding wise for them, and the fact that we run into Azure a lot in the field. We don't really run into AWS, funny enough. That they haven't leaned on Azure Stack to replace Hyper-V as that platform. And the System Center, VMM plus Hyper-V combination, Azure Stack kind of does all that together. You can use Arc with it. Like it's a neat platform, but you are going into the Azure ecosystem around that. And so it can also be a bit of a challenge there. There's apparently some changes coming with Hyper-V 2025, which is they've announced a lot of those changes already to try to bring it up to snuff with something like ESXi or AHV in terms of being a pure hypervisor. But I think there's a lot of people who tried Hyper-V a long, long time ago,
Right.
and VMware is just that much better of a platform that they said, I'm not going to go back. I
Yeah,
think
that's a good point. The clients that we see making that move right this minute are almost all very small. The ones who are in that medium range, 100 VMs or more, let's call it we'll call that medium for now. Oftentimes need more hosts in order to replicate what they're doing in VMware today. And the management is quite different.
Yeah.
So it's quite different, frankly. Now we don't have Proxmox in here. We don't have OpenStack.
No.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, those are pretty engineering intensive platforms, right?
Yeah, we did get one person who specifically said we're going to Proxmox to me at the conference.
Yeah.
And shout out to him. And I hope his flight back to Europe, because he definitely said he was from a European company. I hope his flight back was safe. A lot of the Proxmox stuff has come from the system admin side. And even OpenStack has come from the engineering side of the world. And there are providers out there who do OpenStack, and it's the challenge of OpenStack, especially if you're going to run it yourself, is that you are really taking on a lot more of the load. It is not a product that you go buy and deploy. It is something that you build from the ground up.
Yeah.
And you got to have some real smart engineers to be able to do that on the back end. And that's why we don't hear a lot about it unless you start to really move up into that enterprise space where you're a Walmart and the value proposition of building that platform from the ground up and not being tied to a vendor actually has a business impact. If you have 150 VMs, it very much does not. I like to call it valuing your money more than your time. And you end up spending a lot more of your time and not a lot of your money to try and build out this platform where you run into a bunch of headaches trying to maintain support going forward. On the Proxmox side, they're gaining support from the ecosystem. I've seen a couple backup vendors come out and say that they'll back up Proxmox, but it's very much a early product, and it's very much built around its own set of tools. I would honestly liken it to not necessarily in quality, but in mindset to what Nutanix was in like the 2014, 2015 timeframe, where they were trying to do everything themselves because they wanted it to be this like all in a box, all one platform. I don't need to worry about integration points. And the problem is that gets you so far. And then you hit your headroom on environments where they have more than just that platform. So I would not be surprised to see Proxmox take some market share here, but I think a lot of times it's just going to be one of those things where it's like, ooh, that doesn't fit with what we do. But it was more interesting. And Doug, I think, where do you see a lot of these organizations in the next 3 years? Not just where they live, but like, what do you see their next 3 years look like?
Well, everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change, right? It's a CIO friend of mine's saying. I think the idea of selecting and changing a hypervisor is all well and good. I think as we zoom out a little bit, the smaller platforms as a whole have a more difficult time integrating into existing environments, especially if you're well established with your data protection and your DR and your monitoring tools. And in order to get support from some of your key line of business applications, some of those providers still say no if you're on a hypervisor that they're not familiar with. So those are the business drivers, I think, that affect people. Do you think that the idea of selecting and changing hypervisors in 3 years is practical?
I do. I think it comes down to, I think some people have been looking for a lever. This is 100% a lever, right? I want, we've been wanting to switch, but cost to do so or getting business to say yes to is a higher number or a higher, a higher lift than we've been willing to take on. I
Yes.
think it's absolutely practical to do it. I think you can absolutely say we want to go from VMware to any of these alternates in a short enough time frame. But as we've mentioned before, what does that do from a project list? Right? You only have but so much time, and you're doing all of this work to end up exactly where you are right now, which is running your VMs on a platform,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The police are coming to get me.
Sorry. Yeah.
They're not. They're not coming to get me. I think they're coming to get Doug. But when we, this is how live this is, everybody. There's background noise. So when we actually sit down and kind of talk through like what is this move really doing for you, I think a lot of organizations are potentially using this as a lever to optimize what they're doing, to modernize their platforms, and maybe make a shift to another platform that they've liked for a long time. They haven't had the ability to get there, or they're doubling down on what VMware is doing and saying, okay, well, I've wanted to get this automation platform for the last like 3 years, and I could never justify the budget. Now I have to, right? It's in the budget now because it's going to be part of me paying to run my VMs. We actually did have one person, and this was something interesting between the VVF, VCF side of things.
Hmm.
We had one person who came up to the booth, and I found this super fascinating. They renewed back in like the January, February timeframe where it was like, you get vSphere Foundation or Cloud Foundation, go. And they renewed to vSphere Foundation. And they were like, we don't have enough time to move. Moving inside of 3 years is practical. Moving inside of 3 months, less so.
Hmm.
But when they needed to renew, they went with vSphere Foundation because they said, well, we just want vSphere. We don't need all the other stuff. This is fine. And he said, I was sitting in the keynote and I was watching what they were presenting and what was coming next and their roadmap and so on and so forth. And I realized I wasn't going to get any of that. And that was the first time I had heard anybody express a sort of regret about not going to or not going to Cloud Foundation.
Hmm.
And it was very, very interesting to me because there's not really a good upgrade path there. There's not like oh, you're on VVF, you can buy these and upgrade to VCF. That doesn't exist. And so it becomes this sort of like, oh, you renewed for 3 years, you're stuck there for 3 years.
Yeah.
So there are some things there that are super interesting. I would not be surprised to see a lot of people fight for a 1-year renewal onto VVF to say like, okay, let me get some breathing room here and figure out what I want to do, and then potentially go to VCF in at the next year, or that's the year that they take to figure out, do I want to move to an alternate hypervisor? The other side of this is that doing that move requires you to kind of keep you got to swap the engine while the car's driving,
Hmm.
right? So you're going to run both at some point. The cost of doing both is where this is really going to hit the road. And we obviously, as Expedient, have options to help you along that path. But it's super interesting to kind of think about that change there.
Yeah, it's driven a ton of interest in Expedient's VMware Cloud services and our Nutanix Cloud services. Just some of the audience may not realize Expedient has been delivering VMware cloud environments since 2008, really very early on. We're one of the oldest and now one of the largest. And that's why we're a Pinnacle partner, is because we run 100,000 VMs in that environment.
130,000.
I'm
The
sorry?
new number is 130,000 across our
130,000?
platforms. Yeah.
That's super cool. And what that means is they can run VMware. They can continue to run VMware without necessarily paying what one gentleman referred to as the blood money to Broadcom,
I
which
must
is
have missed
kind of
that one.
a little harsh. But the ability, and our pricing went up a few percent on
Yeah.
this. The cloud service provider model is a little bit more friendly, and with our scale, we've got some more leverage, but they don't have to throw away their skill sets. They don't have to throw away their staff. They can take advantage of our cloud platform. Most are in a cloud platform already. They're just making that move, or at least considering making that move from DIY or co-location into a VMware-based cloud or a Nutanix-based cloud.
And Doug, I think kind of wrapping up here, we're going to get to some Q&A here in a moment.
Yeah.
Kind of what are the do you have any other conclusions that we can take away from this survey that we did?
I think there's a few we can take away. There's still significant value with VMware to the clients. They know it. Many don't want to leave. They're being forced to. They're familiar with it. They know it's reliable software. And as you said, after the keynote, a lot of people came back excited that some of the integration that VMware had been promising pre-Broadcom is actually well on the way. Again, the staffing matters, the skill sets matter. They know how to run VMware in their line of business applications. It's the only hypervisor that those line of business applications will support. One other conclusion, most of the companies that we've talked to this year, apart from VMware Explore, have been a little bit paralyzed on what to do. Now, VMware has been slow and Broadcom has been slow to provide renewal pricing in many situations, but a lot have been frozen, or they've kicked the can down the road 1 year, as you said. They may have renewed, but they've only renewed for a year, so they can at least give themselves enough headroom to make a more meaningful decision. I mean, what do you think? What did you hear? What conclusions can you draw?
Yeah, I think we've asked this question a few times of like, okay, let's go back in time 2 years. Broadcom hasn't announced anything.
Yeah.
And I asked you, hey, would you want to switch hypervisors? And the answer would almost certainly be no. A lot of people would say, like, I mean, I'm fine. It's VMware. It's whatever. I think a lot of people now are looking at it in terms of that money change, right? Like, oh, the price went up. Back then, it was the pricing was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I was only paying for support. Everything was great. I think that shift now has caused some people to make a rash sort of feeling versus what they would actually do if given the opportunity. We've asked this again. We have a number of customers who are in our VMware platforms. Our shared environment saw an on average a 4% increase in their total bill. Most people just went, okay, and then moved on. Right. Same thing with in our private environments, it was 17%. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you're taking on more of the overhead in a private environment. And so there's a higher cost there, but it was 17% overall in their total bill. And most of them went, okay, sure. It's not 300, 500, 600% like we've seen from the licensing standpoint. It's a much lower number. And so this is I think a lot of organizations are looking at it and going, okay, what do I really want to do here? And the effect that it has to a business down the line, right? Even cloud service providers like us, right? We just talked about how our rates went up, and we didn't exactly have the ability to say like, okay, we're going to flip everybody and we're just going to renew for a little bit. We run our business off of this. Yeah. So we've had a lot of plans this year that we had to put on hold because we had to spend so much time optimizing our platforms for our workloads to make sure that our number of cores that we were spending was the correct amount for what we are running, so that we could make sure that we weren't passing on huge cost increases to our customers and clients based on us not having an optimized environment. I want to give a massive shout out to all of our engineers on our delivery and our support teams and our PRE teams on optimizing the workloads in the very quick fashion that we've done that. It's been a huge team effort, and our clients deeply appreciate it just from when they look at their bill and they're not freaking out at that. So thank you guys so much for that.
Yeah.
I think the other part of this is what you will do is interesting, right? That's what this survey is there. How you do it, I think, is more interesting. I think a lot of people who are looking at AHV, if you're in a 3-tier environment, there's a capital expenditure to get there. Right. There's ways that we can do it with our Nutanix platforms where we can eliminate a lot of that capital to make that shift. I think that's what a lot of people that I've talked to about making a switch, and they want to look at Nutanix and they go, yeah, but I got to buy new hosts and I got to buy new licensing and so on. And they're like, that's a huge cost of the business. And then I have to go build all of it. There's ways for us to simplify that down and get people to where they really want to be. But Doug, when we're talking through hypervisors, it's not just, okay, I'm going to move from this hypervisor to this one. Like, there are some other things that go along there.
There are, and just to circle back on sticking with VMware, our workload optimization effort to make the VMware cloud remain affordable is, like you said, it's a hidden project. It's hard to see. Every client who plans to stay in VMware has to do that same work, and it's a huge lift. The way that cores are licensed now has got a huge impact for many, many people who are sticking with DIY or sticking with a co-location model. So, what are you going to do if you stay put? A VMware cloud is a pretty attractive alternative because there's not much of a lift. If you change, you have got three projects on your hands. You've got hypervisor selection, you've got validation with the rest of your tooling like backup and DR and monitoring and every other utility that you use in your environment. And you've got the migration project itself, which is the most worrisome, frankly, of all three, is making the move from one to the other. That's where most of the risk lies. So it's big. It's a huge lift, no doubt.
And I think that's the key thing here, is that a lot of people are interested in changing. A lot of people want to change. We've heard from a number of people who were at the conference and really gotten to hear a lot of their stories and why they were looking at one versus another. Obviously, Doug at the top of this mentioned you had a lot of federal, state utilities. These are organizations that can't change anything quickly. They are in those environments. They are certified in those environments. They're heavily regulated. And so from an application standpoint, these are certified to run on VMware. These are certified to be secure on VMware. So making a switch is not something they can do as easily as potentially you in the private sector, where we're making these changes and our applications don't really care. So that's also a super interesting thing to kind of walk through and think about. I would say that our VMware and Nutanix cloud alternatives that we provide as a service are more attractive than ever, because we can help clients get to where they want to be, to get to that true outcome of, we wanted to switch and save money, or we wanted to make things easier for ourselves, or we think that this is actually a better platform for us. We can help get there faster and eliminate a lot of the overhead. And we've already done, as Doug mentioned, there's a selection and validation. We've already done that. We've already figured out that AHV is the best one. We already have Nutanix in the environment. We already know how to back up off of it. We already know how to do DR with it. We already know how to monitor it. So all of those pieces that would go around that have already been taken care of. So you can skip to just the migration part. And that's where our folks come in that are on our delivery team that do migrations literally every single day, who spend a lot of their time finding all these nooks and crannies because they've seen all of them before. Most people get to do a migration once every 5 years, or maybe when they switch jobs, they have to do a migration from platform to platform. But we do it all the time. It is something that we're good at. We got a lot of reps on it. And so that's something that I think we can take forward to help people get to where they want to be and walk through all of that hypervisor shift. And if you have any sort of questions about that, we have a QR code that's going to be down here, I think, somewhere, where you can ask your questions now. We did get some questions in the registration. We always appreciate those because it helps a lot to make sure that we're talking about the right things. So we're going to go to a couple of those first. And if you have anything live, go ahead and put it into the QR code, which is actually that way, top left corner of your screen there. The first question here is, what positive outcome would Broadcom create with their steep price increases and breaking ties with other organizations such as AWS? I think the basic one is they want to move towards a full platform. The sum of the components is not the same as the single platform. And being able to put it all together in a single interface as a single platform is something they've been working on for like 6 years now, probably longer than that. I had Cloud Foundation in one of its early stages at a previous employer. I had at one point one of the largest deployments in the world. What it is then and what it is now are very different. It was previously, this is a way to manage multiple environments. This is a way to deploy workload domains. This is a way to simplify the patching process with a known good bill of materials, and all of these versions have been tested together. The new model is, this is one unit. and you can carve it up and do things inside of it as you'd like, but it is one unit. And they would like people to get the maximum value out of that unit. And that doesn't work when you have a bunch of individual components. And so being able to have everybody onto one thing, it eliminates a lot of goofy interoperability questions because you don't have, well, this customer has vSphere and vSAN, but this one has vSphere and NSX, and this one has vSphere and NSX and ARIA. And how do those three interoperate together? Because they're all together, they can all be tested together, which means you have a better overall platform going forward. So I think that's the value and the positive outcome is that you get a true on-prem, or in our case, a service provider led cloud platform for you as an organization. I think that's a huge thing that VMware has been trying to get to for years, but they were never able to really say and stand on, this is our platform and everybody's going to get it. And I think Broadcom was really, that's the one thing that Broadcom came in to do, was to say, let's take this vision all the way forward. And they just accelerated it a lot faster than most people were expecting them to.
Yeah, part of it, the reason is selfish, right? Broadcom wants less products to support so they can do better work on all those products. Part of it is valuable to the end user clients. They've got a more effective experience and a broader set of features that they can take advantage of them. Some of them don't want it, but many of them, once they get them, will take advantage of them.
Yep. We can go to the next question. What are other organizations doing to mitigate the Broadcom changes? A lot of it is eliminating as many overhead cores as possible. I can at least speak to what we've done is finding all of any overhead that we had in the environment. This was an old cluster that we hadn't really taken the time to clean out and shut down. Get this old cluster out. Making sure that you're simplifying the environment down cluster wise to, this is the minimum amount that I need to run these platforms. Making sure that your cores match the new model. They have a 16 core minimum on a host, which means that if you have, or 16 cores per socket, which means that if you have a, dual 10 core host, you need to go buy an additional, 12 cores on that platform. That's a big deal. That's a huge cost that goes into nothing. It's literally just licensing to hit minimums, right? So making sure that your hosts are established there. We've seen people who have been replacing their hosts with, going from 10 and 12 core hosts to 16 core hosts just to make sure that they have their licensing and their physical resources actually matching. Doug, what have you heard from the field?
Yeah, I think just turning off zombie servers and things they should have done years ago, frankly, is part of that work. And also, many are taking advantage of an interesting licensing model as they consider a VMware cloud like Expedient offers. Many of them are considering an interesting licensing model that Pinnacle partners like Expedient offer, that it's called bridge licensing, and it allows them to retain their current licensing set, or a form of their current licensing for a few months while they make a decision and consider whether they're going to renew or change hypervisors or move to a VMware cloud like us. So we've got some interesting leverage as their top tier partner that many of the others don't, many of the other partners don't. So there's a few different options. These are worth a discussion, and it's dependent on your applications and on how much effort you want to throw at this. We'd love to chat with you if this is something that you're considering. There's a new question here, AJ. I'll read it off to you if you want to answer it. Will Expedient continue to utilize VMware for Expedient Edge, which is our Edge product, kind of a data center in a box that can be dropped into remote locations where the workloads may not be as optimized or use all of the other components in the platform?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We will continue to support VMware on our Expedient Edge platform because the workloads that are out at those locations, a lot of them are, like we mentioned earlier, they're certified to run on VMware. They're not certified to run on other platforms. Right. So that's a big reason why we're continuing to support VMware at the edge. I will say we are working with VMware on trying to figure out the best way to optimize those. because in a lot of these environments, they're not running, 3 full hosts worth of stuff. They're running like 10 VMs, right? So we're trying to figure out ways to help optimize that. It's also why we brought Nutanix in from a hypervisor standpoint to run on edge. So we can do AHV on edge and be much more granular in that space. Where we can go down into smaller VM counts and optimize the licensing that way. But yes, we will continue to support and utilize VMware and Edge for those workloads that really require it from just literally a support compliance standpoint or from a application standpoint, because that's the right thing to do. But yes, there's definitely some work being done there.
And just to broaden out a little bit, we offer multi-tenant cloud in our VMware cloud. We offer private cloud in our VMware cloud. We offer private cloud in Nutanix cloud, and we offer edge computing or equipment on site that we manage at remote locations in both VMware private cloud and Nutanix private cloud. So those are the different flavors. And if you include our DR offerings, those are available in both Nutanix and VMware as well. So there's lots of options that are available to you. And all of these let you either stay with a familiar platform or move to another platform besides VMware, but still not have the management burden, to get away from that management burden that most of us have carried for all these decades now.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing there is choice and the optionality that we have and can offer and can meet people where they are, not necessarily make them fit into what we have. I think we could take, there was one more question or 2 more questions, I think. What time does the pizza arrive at my door? Turn around. It's right behind you. It's actually not behind you. I'm really sorry to give you a surprise like that. This is I just saw this question come in and I thought it was funny. We did not offer any pizza. I'm real sorry if you hoped that there was pizza. But yeah, we definitely are interested in talking further. You can scan the QR code that'll be available here in a moment to schedule time to talk with us. We've talked with a huge number of people around workloads and what to do with them. How do I move my VMware environment, or how do I optimize my workloads or optimize my licensing in the best way possible? One of the key things that we didn't even talk about today was our DR licensing, and that one of the best ways to optimize that licensing is to do DR with a service like us, where we don't charge for the VMware licensing until you actually do a failover or a test, or you actually use those resources, which means instead of in your secondary site having a bunch of hosts that are sitting there getting charged every single month for VMware licensing, there's a way to offload that. That's a huge cost savings. There was one more bonus question here that we'll answer before we get out of here. What tools did you utilize to do the analysis to reduce the core footprint? A lot of it came down to looking at our environments, just from going into vCenter and looking at percentages. How much memory was in use in these clusters? How many of these hosts could we take offline? How much CPU utilization did we have? We use tools like Elastic, which we use as a service to see long-term performance data. We use vRealize operations on the back end to pull all of our performance data in to see over time, do we see significant spikes month to month, or is it fairly straightforward across the board? So a lot of our tooling and a lot of our know-how went into this. There wasn't like a report that we spit out and it said, okay, you can get rid of these 20 hosts and you'll be good. Here's how we actually sit down and really squeeze the juice with really great subject matter experts that we have. And I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. Doug, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been really, really great.
Thank you.
This is Doug and I got to hang out in public for a week, which was just a delight too. I want to thank also everybody at Expedient who came and was supporting the booth. I think we had a really great turnout from people in the booth, from the people who were there. I think we had a really, really successful time there. And if you have any questions and you want to talk more, go ahead and scan the QR code and we can get you in front of people like Doug to help answer them. And with that,
and if you sent a question and we didn't answer it, we will follow up with you, by the way.
Yep. And with that, I'm going to wrap up for today. Join us in 2 weeks where I will be talking with our good friends at Packet Watch around how we were able to work together on building better incident response and recovery programs. And we will see you then. Thanks.
Thanks.